How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji, host of Tier Talk. Just read a very interesting article. It's an op-ed that was published by New York Times. Author was Heather Ann Thompson. And she's talking about the riot in South Carolina prison, Lee's Correctional Institution. And of course, the perspective is very biased, very misinformed, and at no point does it give any level of responsibility towards the inmates who ultimately took the life of 7 other inmates and injured 22 others. So it's frustrating when you read that, because I understand there are multiple concerns here that need to be addressed. I respect that. I know we need these programs. I know you got to have a facility that is ran properly, classification-wise, good leadership, communication. But ultimately, there has to be a level of responsibility that are placed on these inmates for committing these acts if we want to fix it, if we want to do what's correct. So when I come back from our sponsors, I'm going to talk about my thoughts in regards to this article that Heather Ann Thompson wrote, op-ed, and it was published by the New York Times. The link will be in the description, along with my response piece that hopefully the New York Times will publish. But if they don't, I'll send it over to Corrections One. They're always happy to publish our thoughts. So stand by for our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Heather Ann Thompson's article.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Being a corrections officer takes its toll on even the strongest individuals. The constant need to perform at the highest level, putting your life at risk in a hostile environment, and the mental scarring of traumatic experiences. 31% of corrections officers show symptoms of PTSD, and 66% of people with PTSD also suffer with a substance abuse problem. The Transformations First Responders program is specially designed to help veterans and officers heal from the grips of addiction and PTSD in a comfortable, supportive, and serene setting. You are not alone. If you have questions about the services we offer, give us a call at 866-762-8454 to get more information on this affordable and life-changing program.
Thank you guys for listening to my sponsors. Guys, don't forget, the show Tier Talks for you brave men and women who work behind the wall. So please, if you haven't, subscribe, interact, engage, and hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. Heather Ann Thompson, who's an historian, writes this article. I expected a little bit more from her because she's an historian. They look up facts. But then you got to remember those facts they got to be interpreted. And I believe her interpretation is through a biased filter that's totally against the system. It really is. So I'm not even going to look to read anything else that she's ever written, but she's supposedly an historian on prisons or occurrences at prisons. I forget what the specifics was. But obviously, when you're reading this op-ed totally puts the blame on everything else but the inmates responsible for taking the lives of 7 other inmates and injuring 22 other inmates. Again, I'm not saying the system is perfectly in the clear. There's a lot of things that we need to work on. But to sit there and say that the system is totally responsible and not put any accountability on the inmates that did the deed, that committed to this vile act, is literally, it's outright disgusting. It really is. Because if you want true change, well, that's going to happen only if the changes you're trying to implement are balanced by seeing everything in context. And this author is not. She's totally putting blame on the system, and then kind of the system is the fault for the inmates' actions. And you know what's funny is, when I was a kid, I was always taught to take responsibility for my actions, because ultimately that's how true change happens, right? Taking responsibility for your actions. And some of that responsibility comes in the form of punitive measures. But if you don't mention the inmate's responsibility in regards to acts like this, and you keep on mentioning the system being at fault, then punitive measures are always going to be challenged, because the public is not going to see the inmates at fault. They're going to blame the system and totally think that it's the system that's at fault. And we're punishing the inmates because the system is failing them. And it's always about the lack of programming. Well, not every inmate wants to program. We know that. And some that do, some of it's for external reasons. Not because they want a program, it's because they may need a program, because they want to go on parole. So even the incentive, the motivation isn't there. So the programming is not a solution to everything. It's partial, the solution. Because the inmates that want a program, we offer it, and that can affect change. But what about for the inmates that don't want a program? And that's where the punitive measures come in. And it's funny, because if you work in the system, punitive measures could also be seen as preventive. Because sometimes I remove an inmate from population to protect other inmates. We lock it down to try to identify the threat. And even when they say, I was reading articles about officers smuggling in contraband. I did a video on this. But I said when an officer smuggles in contraband, they're usually providing it to an inmate. And at all times, that inmate is in control of that officer. Now, don't get me wrong, not to minimize or negate the responsibility that officer has in regards to committing that corrupt act. But they have been corrupted. And they've been corrupted by an inmate that literally will not get in trouble when they attempt to corrupt. So it's a immediate minimal risk for great reward. So we're not holding the inmates responsible for that action, and ultimately by not holding them responsible, it empowers them to keep doing it. Again, not to minimize or negate the officer. Whatever they did, they're going to be held responsible for, and they deserve the law to come down on them. But so does the other player. So does the inmate. This not putting the responsibility on the inmates is what's really screwing the system up, and what's really messing our ability to run a fair, firm, consistent, and totally defined by safety and security, a facility, a correctional facility. Because right now, as I said, the changes are unbalanced, they're biased, and they're based on good intent that can easily be manipulated behind our walls by inmates that don't care. They take advantage of the system. She also mentioned in the article about cell phones and how if you want to eliminate the contraband issue, sell cell phones on Canteen. And now right off the bat, how crazy is that? Sure, the inmates were able to get some pictures or some videos to show you how the facility was running and kind of give you an idea of what's happening behind that world, but I'm sure there's a lot of illegal stuff on those cell phones as well. Inmates have been known to use cell phones to conduct illegal business because it can't be tracked. Business like smuggling and drugs, sex trafficking, murder for hires. These are criminal activities that can affect the safety and security inside the wall, also on the outside. And we just want to give them that. Here, take some phones, run your business, do what you got to do. It doesn't work that way. And then she mentions the delayed response. That it took so long to get the delayed response was a controlled response. 3 areas of a facility were affected, coordinated by cell phones. Weapons, everywhere. And again, a lot of that stuff deals with understaffing. How come you don't mention understaffing in your concerns? You want to protect the population, you need to protect the population by making sure that there's proper staffing. Trust me, if you want to make changes, it should go through staff. Staff will help you make the changes that are needed so they can more effectively do their job. But the delayed response here was because they had to be organized. Just like the inmates had it coordinated, they wanted to coordinate a response. 3 areas were affected. Don't just run in there blindly. You can sacrifice the safety of the facility, the response team. You may run in and set up a hostage situation now where now the response team is captured. Control is lost. Remember, we're going to respond to a scene when there's somewhat compliance from the inmate population. We open up that door and we get overtaken. And this was such a complex situation because 3 areas were affected. You know, so the response team may needed time to figure out what was the best response. Because now when they're responding, it's not about that immediate threat. It's also about making sure that their response doesn't compromise the rest of the facility and put more people at risk. Because I'm sure if they responded blindly, people will come up and say, what'd you run in there directly for? You compromised the rest of the facility. Now other inmates got hurt. So they need to make sure it was contained. But again, this is common sense to us. For some reason, it seems to sneak by everybody, including Heather Ann Thompson, who wrote this article. But again, Heather, you're an historian. You know, you like to look for facts, I'm assuming. But if you're going to sit there and totally focus your argument or your opinion based on what you just presented in that article, and guys, I put the link to the article below, also with my response. I have a response up there as well, so you can see her article and my response. You're going to get misinformation out there. You want to change the system? Let's do it in a balanced way. Let's look at what needs to be done for rehabilitation, but also with the foundation of safety and security. Remember, as mentioned before, not every inmate wants the program. And if you sit there and constantly blame the system and the system's at fault, then it's going to take away the measures that we need to do to protect the inmates when you have those inmates that don't want a program, that just are destined to do the wrong thing because that's what they want to do. So, again, thought the article was very biased. No responsibility on the inmates who committed to these vile acts. Let's fix the system. Let's do it balanced. Let's be balanced. I'd like to see if New York Times published my response. That would be pretty cool. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Please give me your comments below. Love to hear it. And if you haven't, guys, remember the show's for you brave men and women that work behind the wall. So please subscribe, interact, engage, and comment. Don't forget to hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. All right, guys. Tier Talk, Anthony Ganji. Stay safe.